Hello there, welcome back to the Rich Fritzky Show. As ever, it's a pleasure to have you with me. It means a lot. This week, I'm going back at it, folks, because America's in crisis. We, you and I, are in crisis. And each day that passes is filled with new stories, new revelations about our president, and the literal shit show that has been his response to the sacred trust that he was given, to his stewardship of serving, improving, nurturing, and protecting all the people of these United States of America. I'm sorry, compelled to address this once again. I think because it is crunch time, because so much is at stake, because I'm so angry, because I can't begin to understand how it is that my brother and sister Catholics who believe in a God of love, mercy, forgiveness, and humility can be supporting this cruel, unforgiving, and anything but humble man of vitriol and vengeance and certainly not love. Or how it is that evangelical Christians can continue to do so, or how it is that Hispanics in Florida and elsewhere, who he openly disdains and vilifies, can possibly be doing so. Are we all just pretenders, or, as I pray and trust, sentient, loving human beings? I am compelled to do this because our country is truly at risk, because his flagrant, authoritarian, damn the Constitution modus operandi alone warrants impeachment, i.e. the emoluments clause, the separation of powers, both legislative and judicial, colluding with foreign governments, absurd politicization of the Justice Department, repeated violations of the Hatch Act, and use of both federal properties and employees for overt political activities, to name just a few. I will share today but a highlights reel of this past week's news alone, and then a quick golden oldies laundry list of past sins, story after story that once upon a time and not so very long ago would have crippled and devastated the candidacy of anyone, however popular, from being elected to the presidency, literally taken them out. Why not so very long ago mere adultery was enough? It would have rendered Trump toast. Why? Because we used to give a damn. We cared. We demanded people of virtue, people who would be honest with us. We demanded truth and people who would lead with dignity and honor, begging me to ask the obvious to so many. Just when did you give up? When did you stop caring? When did you stop thinking critically? When did it become just about you? When did you turn your back on the other? When did you decide to accept the relentless lies, the overt disdain for oh so many, the lack of compassion, the overt racism, the literal inciting of violence against Black Lives Matter protesters, the disdain of Constitution, of law, of justice, of intelligence? Just this week, this was the hard news. Trump lied to the American people about the danger of COVID-19. He knew exactly how dangerous it was, but he told you that it would just disappear, that you neither need be afraid nor prepared. He followed his own advice, by the way. He didn't act because he made a political and not a medical calculation and looked to punish the states with Democratic governors, where the virus was most virulent back then. He chose politics over principle. He played with the lives of Americans, and as a consequence, we now approach 200,000 dead. We deserved the truth. We needed him to honor what is a sacred trust, and yet he has rather lied to you more than 18,000 times now. Inconceivable, but true. and I puzzle my puzzler trying to understand how it is that any patriotic American can possibly be all right with this. When did a diabolical aversion to truth become so tolerable? As to Black Lives Matter, he literally is inviting violence at protests, urging his alt-right friends to confront, abjectly dismissing their cry for justice and reform. He refuses by any measurement to acknowledge that the standard of living for black citizens has for so long remained static, in that nothing has changed for the average black family who still have but 1/10 of the revenue with which to live as the average white family. A young black citizen is 5 times more likely to have to go to trial than a white American committing the exact same offense. There are 2 systems of justice, and notably when Bob Woodward dared suggest to the president that they were both beneficiaries of white privilege, he responded to him, "You're drinking the Kool-Aid." "No, I don't. I don't think about that at all." Don Jr., the president and vice president have all, just this week, publicly spoken up on behalf of a cold-blooded 17-year-old murderer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who without any provocation whatsoever approached and murdered one Black Lives Matter protester while seriously wounding another. He was not, as they insist, trying to run away. They present a shaky, bogus argument as to the second man he killed, typically in Trumpian fashion, while absolutely ignoring the greater and so obvious truth. He denies that he ever called fallen American soldiers suckers and losers, but the truth is that he did. And it has been verified by CNN, by Associated Press, the New York Times, the Washington Post, and even his home turf of a network, Fox News. Puts you in mind of his disdain for Senator John McCain, who spent 5 years in a Vietnamese prison camp after his plane got shot out of the sky. Don't you remember? His "I like those who don't get captured." This from a privileged guy who got 5 deferments for alleged bone spurs. Then there's the ever-interfering sycophant, his attorney general, who even backed up Trump on his absurd advice, telling people to vote both by mail and in person. Just this week, that same attorney general sought to intervene on behalf of Trump in a case that is well outside of justice's purview. E. Jean Farrell, who accused Trump of sexual abuse, and her claim is highly credible, has filed a defamation suit against him. It's an old case, as are so many other claims against President Trump. But Barr bizarrely claims that since Trump's disparagement of her was made when he was president, that justice has standing. My God, it simply does not, as this is a private suit in a private case. It has nothing to do with we, the Republic. Bob Woodward, in his new book Rage, asserts that under the auspices of Bill Barr, America's shameless later-day Roy Cohn, he has transformed our country's highest law enforcement agency into, hear this, a mob kingpin's personal legal defense squad. There are his egregious violations of the Hatch Act, and using both federal facilities, most notably our house, what's called the People's House, the White House, and federal employees to support partisan political activities. No other president ever dishonored this essential dividing line, none in our history. And there's the report that he precluded the Director of National Intelligence, Dan Coats, from warning us about Russia's assault on our free elections this year. As I speak, the Russians are today propagandizing and assaulting mail-in voting on their buddy in the White House's behalf. And not for nothing, but on climate change, which he continues to ignore. The earth is growing hotter, and droughts ever more inevitable, and so the American West is on fire today. And he does not appear to care. A mere tropical storm in the east produced more than 119 tornadoes not long ago. In the east, where there were never tornadoes. And the hurricanes will continue to be ever more devastating. And the waters are rising. But ever the candidate, he will not acknowledge bad news, or the fact that he is one of the villains in this continuing, inevitably life-threatening drama. And there's his continuing and dangerous lies about a rigged election and the inevitable fraud that comes with mail-in voting. There's no truth here. There's no evidence or proof of this in existence. And lest you forget, just a few of his greatest hits are what to me are literally the nigh on batshit crazy. The separation of parents from their children at the border. The failure to produce any health care plan whatsoever, while promising one immediately after his election 4 years ago, and yet again 3 weeks ago, when he told you that we'd have it in 2 weeks. Again, nada. And yet he files a brief in the Supreme Court at one and the same time to yet again attempt to kill the Affordable Care Act and to remove more than 20 million Americans at this perilous time from having any insurance whatsoever. Have you forgotten the truth about Ukraine and the righteousness of an impeachment that was stifled only by partisan politicians who violated the duty and trust and the vow they took to uphold the laws of the United States of America? How about the old discriminatory Muslim ban? How about those Mexican rapists? How about his one crowning achievement, the massive tax cut for the richest that did absolutely nothing for the poorest? How about the constant assault upon and elimination of a sea of valid efforts and initiatives of the Environmental Protection Agency in deference to the fossil fuel industry? And while he promised to show you his taxes after the 2016 election, he never did so, and he never intends to do so. And there are these two that cry out to me. At the United Nations in 2018, he ridiculously said that the problem with the refugee-generating countries is that they need to make their own countries great again. Yes, he said that to the likes of the people who had been forced to leave their once home in places like Syria and Yemen. As to Syria, they had been battered by rebel bombing and by the bombing of the forces of Bashir Assad and by the Russians and by us for no less than 10 years. It is a wonder that anyone's home is left standing. And finally, as to the egregious amount of rapes in the military, when our genius of our president said nothing whatsoever as to what so many women in service to their country had endured and suffered, but rather and only condemned the geniuses in the military who integrated men and women in the military in the first place, because they didn't understand that such behavior was then only a natural consequence of their having done so. What does that say about the standing that women have in his life and in his worldview? The danger has ever been and remains that untethered to either heritage or to faith, or to the Constitution or to law, he is a loose cannon, devoid of any settled belief. His America First is not and never has been about American exceptionalism. What once made us exceptional was never that we were the mightiest with the biggest planes and the biggest bombs. It was and remains our heritage, our history, our legacy, our national soul, and that once open door that send these the tempest tossed to me. It is neither in walls, nor in barriers, nor in Muslim bans, but rather in our willingness to resolve the overarching and common denominator challenges of all mankind, beginning with the saving of the planet, our common home, and the source of all life. We must start anew, we must begin again, and we must do so today by doing whatever we can to remove this inhumane leader from our White House. Please know that I was an impassioned supporter of Bernie Sanders, but I am because of the stark danger of this time and this president's repeated assault upon the very instruments of democracy that I revere, now just as passionate about electing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, two people who love America, its people, and its sacred institutions, who will restore honor and dignity and truth to the presidency and vice presidency. In his mountaintop speech on the night before he was killed, Martin Luther King proclaimed that Black Americans would ascend, would get to the promised land, for the Lord had enabled him to go up to the mountaintop where he saw it, but that he may not get there with them, and that there would be difficult days ahead. Truth is, there have now been 52 years of difficult days, and still they wait. Is there then any wonder that, tired of our endemic racism, which Trump now absurdly relies upon to win, that they demand justice and an end to discrimination in all its insidious ways? What's little known is that King never got to complete that speech, for after he bellowed out, "Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord," he was so emotionally spent and drained that he just sat down and cried. He knew that he was to be sacrificed, and how absurdly difficult the days to come. He just cried, as so many I know are doing today, because of the darkness that has settled upon our land. A darkness that is manifested in our president's treatment of immigrants and dreamers and refugees and Muslims and Mexicans and Hispanic and the poor and Native Americans and those damn democratic cities and even those shit countries and the women he has abused and our free press and our own institutions of governance, from military leaders to the CIA to the FBI to Interior to the EPA, to Housing and Urban Development, to the Urban Mass Transit Administration, and to democratic institutions and the United States Constitution, and to the once Republican Party, and to our earth, and to me, and most certainly you. A lifelong student of history, I revere what this one man has so egregiously torn asunder. My God pleaded with us to love and to forgive and to sacrifice for our brothers and sisters, and to turn the other cheek and to give them our coats as well, and to feed the hungry and to care for the sick and to house the homeless, and to take the damn block of wood out of our own eyes so that we might see, and to go towards the light. And there you have it, November. Please choose the light and not the darkness. Please choose the truth. The stakes for all of us have never been higher, for truly this election may be the most important, with the possible exception of Abraham Lincoln's, in our entire history. For all of our sakes, send this president back to the greedy, selfish, fraudulent dung heap from which he came. That's it for today. I trust it was more than enough. Thank you all. Have a great week. Take care And I will do my best to come back at you next week with some pleasant, heartfelt material instead. Bye now.